Hi, third grade. This is your study guide for your science test coming up on Friday for simple machines. In your notebooks, why don't you get your notebooks, make sure you're checking along with me. We were able to get your simple machine guide glued in, and this has really helpful information for you on the 6 simple machines. I do not think that you need to memorize this whole thing, but you do need to know what the simple machines are. You should be able to describe what they do and maybe an example of what they are, so that you know in your mind, okay, an example of a wedge is an axe or a knife, and the purpose of a wedge is to split things apart, or to cut things apart, or to stop things from moving, like a doorstop. You know, there's a reason why we went through each simple machine. I want you to be able to tell me what the simple machine is and what it does, okay? So this is a really good thing to look over and study for your test. I put together some terms that I want you to focus on. You should, in your notebook over last week, put a definition for spring scale and lubricant in your notebook. If you haven't, then please do that now. The spring scale is a tool we use to measure force, and there's a video in the science playlist if you want to review what a spring scale is. It's not a bad idea. You could watch it again. Lubricant is just a material used to cut down on friction between two moving objects like oil. Its purpose is to cut down on friction. A gear. You just watched a video on gears. Do you remember when we split up into groups and we tried out all the different simple machines at stations? The gear was the wheels with teeth on them. They were white, and you put them on the board and you put them together to see how the gears moved. So a gear is like a wheel with teeth, okay? You need to know that, so put gear in your notebook. Work. We talked a lot about friction and force and motion and different types of motion. Work specifically is when you use a force to move an object, right? So if you push something or move something, your work is moving the object. The distance is how far you move the object. The energy is what you use to move the object. But if you're not able to move it, then there was no work done. So let's say I'm trying to move a big boulder out of my yard, and I'm pushing on it and I'm pulling it and I'm doing everything I can, but I don't move it even a little bit. I didn't actually do any work. The work wasn't done. So I think that that can be a little bit confusing to us, because we know we're expending the energy trying to move it, but if we don't actually move it, the force doesn't move the object, then work didn't happen. You used very little work, okay? So I would write down work, and that it's a force used to move an object, so that you know that in the science vocabulary, work means actually having moved an object, okay? Trade-off. Now, trade-off is a new one, but not really. You'll see in a second that we talked a lot about trade-off. We just didn't call it that. So I want you to write down trade-off in your notebook. And what it says is hard for me to read backwards, so hold on. Trade-off. A small force applied over a long distance. A small force, or small amount of force, applied over a long distance. Okay, what does that mean? And if you need more time to write that down, just pause it, and you can write that down. Take your time. But I am going to erase the board so that I can show you a trade-off, okay? And you might recognize this because we did it in class. Okay? Going back to a inclined plane, okay? I drew a picture of 2 trucks being loaded for you in class, if you remember. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But we drew 2 inclined planes loading up a truck, okay, right on the board. And we have our load on either ramp. Here's our load. It's what we have to move. And here's our other load down here at the bottom of the ramp. Okay, now we have our loads. Okay, this is a shorter distance, but because the inclined plane is at a sharper angle, we're going to use a lot more force to push this. We're fighting gravity. It's a steep angle. We're going to need to use more work and more force to get the load into the truck. If we spread the distance of the inclined plane out, then we can it's much easier for us to push this load into the truck because the distance is spread out and we don't have to fight against gravity so hard, so you use less force. The trade-off is it's a longer distance, but we use less force to move the load, okay? So that's a trade-off, is you want to cut down on the amount of force you use, so you may move an object over a longer distance, but it makes the work easier. It makes you use less, it lets you use less force. Okay, so that is a trade-off. All right. So now you have those terms in your notebook. If I went too fast for you, don't worry. Watch the video again and check off in your notebook. Make sure you have all the terms that I mentioned and review those. Be familiar with those. Be familiar with your simple machines. And you should be good for your test, totally prepared. If you have any questions beforehand, just ask your parents to email me, and I'll be happy to answer them, okay? All right. Happy studying.